Welcome to this explainer. We usually think of history in these neat little distinct eras, right? The industrial age, the electrical age, the information age. But the thing is, these eras didn't just happen by accident. They were actually built by people who looked out at the world, saw a totally wild, untamed force, and somehow figured out how to harness it. So today, we're tracking an incredible narrative of risk, vision, and massive scale. We're going to look at the visionaries who literally built the infrastructure of our future, tracing a line all the way from colonial America right up to the massive digital empire we're all living in today. To start, I want you to picture this. It's 1994. You've got a highly successful career on Wall Street, a super comfortable life, and basically everything is going perfectly according to plan. But then, completely out of nowhere, you discover a new frontier. It's an opportunity so absolutely enormous, so unprecedented, that staying in your safe, cushy job could end up being the biggest regret of your entire life. There's no global delivery network yet. There's no cloud computing. There's literally just an idea. What do you do? Because that is the exact precipice Jeff Bezos stood on when he decided to pack up, get into a car, and drive toward a future that didn't even exist yet. And there's a fascinating historical parallel here. Just as Benjamin Franklin tamed electricity, modern visionaries are doing the exact same thing with digital forces. Think about Franklin back in colonial America. His curiosity led him to experiment with raw electricity, which ultimately led to the invention of the lightning rod, really helping to lay the groundwork for modern civilization. He was a true architect of the electrical age, taming this invisible, dangerous force. Well, fast forward to the 1990s, and Jeff Bezos was looking at a totally different invisible force, the early internet. He decided to build the infrastructure that would go on to define the internet age. Neither of these men just invented a single product. They built the underlying architecture of their entire eras. So, when Bezos was first researching the early web, he found out that internet usage was growing at just an extraordinary, explosive rate. But here is the absolutely crucial mindset shift that separates a basic, run-of-the-mill business from a global empire. While almost everyone else was asking, hey, what can I sell online? Bezos asked a much deeper, fundamental question. What could the internet actually become? He wasn't just trying to build a bookstore. He was trying to figure out the ultimate destination of this brand new digital world, and more importantly, how to build the road to get us there. It's crazy how fast this happened too. In just a few rapid months in 1994, everything shifted. After seeing that explosive web growth, Bezos walked away from his lucrative finance career. Fun fact, he actually originally named his new venture Cadabra, like abracadabra, but he quickly tossed that out because people told him it sounded way too much like cadaver. Yeah, not exactly a great marketing strategy. So, setting up shop in a tiny, cramped garage, he chose the name Amazon, naming it after the largest river in the world. He was signaling his massive ambition from literally day one. Now, making a leap like that requires a very specific psychological tool. He used what he famously calls his regret minimization framework. When he was agonizing over whether to leave finance, Bezos essentially did a mental time travel trick. He projected himself into the future as an 80-year-old man, and he asked himself if he would regret trying and failing at this whole internet thing. The answer was a flat no. But he knew with absolute certainty that he would deeply regret never participating in the internet at all. That was the crucial mindset shift that pushed him to take such a terrifying leap into the unknown. It wasn't about having a guarantee of success. It was just a calculated bet on a highly uncertain future. It's honestly hard to wrap your head around the sheer scale of the contrast between then and now. Back in that humble garage, getting a single solitary book order was a historic event. The early employees worked grueling hours in this tiny space just to fulfill one order at a time. And it's so vital to remember this when we think about massive corporations today. I mean, today Amazon delivers millions of products globally in a matter of hours. But once upon a time, just getting one single person to trust them enough to type their credit card information into a computer and buy a single book, that was a monumental triumph. But of course, the growth wasn't just a smooth, straight line up to the top. As we hit the late 90s and early 2000s, the dot-com bubble completely burst. During that chaotic time, the company was just bleeding money. Bezos kept aggressively taking their revenue and plowing it right back into the company rather than showing a profit. Investors were furious. Financial journalists were literally calling it Amazon bomb. It forces us to pause and wonder about the terrifying thought that must have crossed the minds of everyone working there. What if the critics were actually right? What if this whole thing was just a massive mistake and the business was actually going to fail? Well, Bezos clearly wasn't finished. Despite the immense pressure from Wall Street to just be a nice, profitable little bookstore, he doubled down on his vision. He systematically transformed that simple store into a sprawling empire. First, it was about dominating books, then opening up to third-party sellers with Marketplace, and launching Prime, which completely changed consumer expectations forever. Next came digitizing reading with the Kindle and the launch of AWS. And finally, moving aggressively into the physical and entertainment worlds with massive acquisitions like Whole Foods and MGM. Piece by piece, he was turning Amazon into the everything store. But arguably, the most important turning point in the entire history of the company was AWS, or Amazon Web Services. They were developing cloud computing infrastructure just to handle their own massive server needs when they realized, hey, we could actually rent this computing power out to other companies. With AWS, they essentially stopped just selling physical things and actually began building the underlying infrastructure that runs the modern internet itself. From Netflix to massive government agencies, so much of our digital world now runs on the pipes that Amazon built. Just like Franklin taming electricity, Bezos truly became an architect of the web. Now, to look at the full picture completely impartially, we definitely have to examine the very serious, verified concerns that have been raised about this rapid, massive growth. Building an empire of this scale has very real consequences, and the sources highlight several key areas of intense, ongoing scrutiny. We have to consider worker conditions within their vast logistics network, the sheer unprecedented scale of their corporate power, valid concerns over market competition in their treatment of third-party sellers, as well as growing questions regarding privacy and technology with pervasive devices like Alexa. We are laying these facts out clearly here, leaving it up to you to weigh the societal impact of such massive corporate consolidation against the sheer convenience it provides. Surviving all of these immense challenges required a very specific ironclad framework. Number one, customer obsession, above absolutely all else. Bezos famously left an empty chair in meetings just to physically represent the customer, ensuring their voice was always considered in the room. Then you have long-term thinking, relentless experimentation, and a shockingly high tolerance for accepting failure. I mean, remember the massive flop of the Fire Phone? And finally, that highly controversial strategy of reinvesting cash flow over taking immediate profits. This core philosophy is exactly what allowed a tiny garage startup to weather storms that literally sank thousands of other companies. And then, everything changed. In 2021, Bezos announced he was stepping down from the CEO chair, transitioning over to executive chairman. This transition really marked the definitive end of one massive era. The guy who bet absolutely everything on the internet had definitively won the bet. But this wasn't some quiet early retirement. No, it was the mysterious beginning of completely new ambitions that stretched so far beyond retail. Which brings us right to his aerospace company, Blue Origin. We can see a fascinating parallel and a really stark contrast here. On one side, we have Amazon's entire philosophy: aggressive scaling, extreme speed, moving incredibly fast to build out the digital world. But on the other side is Blue Origin's approach, a notably slow, methodical, multi-generational vision to eventually move heavy industry and ultimately humanity into space. He is taking the massive wealth generated from the hyper-speed of the internet and applying it to a timeline that literally measures progress in decades and centuries, rather than just financial quarters. Today, the scope of his focus has widened immensely. He isn't just an e-commerce giant anymore, he is actively funding the next frontiers of human civilization. He's been known to liquidate $1 billion a year in Amazon stock specifically to fund Blue Origin's space exploration efforts. He is pouring massive resources into artificial intelligence, funding advanced future technologies, and holding significant stakes in media like The Washington Post, alongside a whole portfolio of other speculative investments. He is effectively placing massive, calculated bets on what the entire next century of human progress will look like. All of this brings up a massive, defining question about the sheer scale of modern wealth. What does it actually mean for a society when one single individual has the financial power and influence to unilaterally fund, direct, and shape future industries? We aren't just talking about a high net worth number in a magazine here. We're talking about capital allocation on a civilizational scale. It's a huge question, and it applies not just to Bezos, but to a very small, select handful of modern titans whose private decisions will quite publicly shape all of our futures. Ultimately, as we start to wrap up this explainer, we really have to return to that tiny 1994 garage. When we look back at a guy sitting at a makeshift desk, literally made out of a wooden door, we realize this story was actually never just about selling books online. It was always about taking enormous, calculated risks,
It was about adopting a mindset that builds for a future that everyone else thinks is impossible or simply cannot yet see. So, I'm going to leave you with this final, powerful question to think about. What will the world look like 10, 20, or 30 years from now? Remember, back in 1994, the idea of buying things on a computer screen seemed totally absurd to most people. So, what ideas look absolutely ridiculous today, things we might literally laugh at right now, but will actually turn out to be the very foundations that define human civilization decades from now? Keep your eyes open, because the architects of tomorrow's eras are already building them today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.